Welcome to July's first Sunday reading and conversation with Subhaga Crystal Bacon and Jendi Reiter. Subhaga Crystal Bacon is the author of 5 collections of poetry, including A Brief History of My Sex Life. Their 2023 Lambda Literary Finalist Transitory was the winner of the BOA Isabella Gardner Award for Poetry. Surrender of Water in Hidden Places won the Red Flag Poetry Chapbook Prize in 2023. Savaga is an AWP writer-to-writer mentor and teaching artist, working in schools and libraries with youth and adults, as well as private students. Their work appears in a variety of print and online journals. A queer elder, they live in rural north central Washington on unceded Methow land. Jendi Reiter is a poet, novelist, and collage artist whose work explores themes of belonging and becoming, magic, queerness, and family violence. They are the author of the novels Origin Story and Two Natures from Saddle Road Press, the short story collection An Incomplete List of My Wishes, and 6 poetry books and chapbooks, most recently Introvert Pervert. Their awards include a Massachusetts Cultural Council Fellowship for Poetry, the New Letters Prize for Fiction, the Oscar Wilde Poetry Prize from Gival Press, and 2 awards from the Poetry Society of America. They are the editor of winningwriters.com, an online resource for markets and contests for creative writers. So I'm going to turn the microphone, as it were, over to the two of you, and we'll get started.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Ruth. And it's really wonderful to be here today. I'm really pleased to have this opportunity to read and talk poetry with Jendi. We've had some great conversations already. I'm going to be reading from my new Lily Poetry Review collection, A Brief History of My Sex Life, which explores pretty much everything that the title sort of points to. Family, growing up in mid-century America, coming of age as a sexual and gendered being. It also chronicles a memory of an early childhood sexual abuse, but it's not really written about in any particularly graphic way, but just to give you a warning. And you need to take care of yourself and mute me, please feel free to do so. So we're going to sort of split up our time. I'm going to read a little handful of poems and we'll turn it over to Jendi. And still I pry it loose. My mother was a Nazi child before she came to American ways, the long wearing off of the old country, face slaps and rules for children. All she had to do was look at me, though she did slap first, then ask. We were only to be seen, and when we spoke, we used that old tongue, kann ich mich entschuldigen, to be excused from the table. Excuses, excuses, I made up my share, up the stairs from the dark cellar, without whatever I was sent to get. I forgot. Then her sing-song voice mocking me, I forgot. There was no back talk. Wrong, wrong. I was harmed, held, rubbed, touched. Was she looking then before time revealed the truth? With the pain, release. With release, relief and unraveling. I stuffed and stuffed all the words I couldn't say, forbidden. Who, me? Sunny summer child. A little slow, they thought. But no, not slow. Dumb from the gnarled hands that broke something in me. Murder, murder, a sky of claws, black feathers, danger, 1,000 cuts, anger, a commodity, oil pumps in my Germanic heart. When I was putting the collection together, I was reading Red Comet, the biography of the most recent, I guess, biography of Plath. And she pops up periodically, and she's flavored that poem just a bit. Another sort of Deus Ex Machina for this book, you might say, is the poet Jennifer Martelli, who was my oldest and dearest friend, my poetry soulmate, who passed from pancreatic cancer in September of 2025. Jen was the first reader, my best first reader, both of this book and the last book. And she introduced me to many forms, including the one in this poem, is Suihitsu, which is a sort of loosely related sequence of prose pieces. For my father. I'll take a barrel of wooden assholes if they're free. His garage, orderly, sanctuary of putter and hum, alone on a weekend. After his death, jars of fasteners arranged by size and use, saws, hammers hung. He wasn't handy, but he was neat. I put the tires up on the Buy Nothing site. The couple came in a monster truck, the kind high as a church, homely as a house, maybe not safe as. One by one, he tossed the tires in the bed to get a season more out of them. Freebird on the stereo. Smoke billows up over the empty ditch. It's not fire season, but plumes set off my adrenal system. First, it smells of toast, then the hot pan, then finally brush accelerated by gasoline. The dog and I walk the gravel bed until we meet it and see the two men, one leaning on a shovel, sent to burn what they've cut. We turn back before we're seen. It's Earth Day. A trio of juncos flit and twitter in a cottonwood sapling. Have I ever heard their song this way, up close, blending both sight and sound? Junco, are you talking about the smoke or the water coming soon? Smoke and water, water and smoke. We try not to expect the burn. More and more, I think about death. I write poems that dredge up debris, what was said and done, leaving a singe. My parents dead, the house that was our home, safe as, sold again. The garage might be a barrel of wooden assholes, an in-law suite, might be a mess of discarded junk. If you, like me, are an Elizabeth Bishop fan, you might recognize that I repurposed the line from her poem, The Moose, high as a house, high as a church, homely as a house. Lots of poems from my parents. These are the ones that sort of came forward for today's reading because, our most primary shaping forces, right, are our parents. This is another form I was introduced to by Jen. It's actually a prompt called Sense of Home. I wrote a little article about this. It was in the Writer's Chronicle, I think in January or February, right after the book came out. Hearing my mother. The flowers looked like spring in the Easter display, so I added them to my cart. Once home, unwrapped, they drooped as if exhausted. I put them in the pitcher, cracked and re-glued, but lovely still, with its painted poppies and gold trim. Flowers of sleep, beloved of Hypnos, Nyx, and Thanatos, Assyrian's daughter of the fields. I walk the thawing earth, revealed under melting snow, pocked with autumn's leaves. Nuthatch and chickadee come back from wherever they've been. Tomorrow's the resurrection. I'm not a believer with a capital B. Still, I trust what's gone under to return. Persephone, Jesus, even my mother, her lost voice saying, I can't have anything nice. Now, just two more, and then we'll pass it off to Jendi. Protect our children, slogan for Florida's anti-LGBTQ legislation. Which one arrayed behind the man with the pen in their neat uniform will die because they could not say gay? Which one holding the sign, protect our children, died a little bit inside while the ink dried? Which one will run to find kin where their true self lives? Which was the one shot by her father in Georgia, which by his boyfriend, which rests in a trash can in Chicago, which was felled by the fear-fueled rage for being what she was, what she knew, despite all the laws to the contrary. We plant shrubs and trees as the ground thaws, sticks with little tags that say golden currant, ash, serviceberry, maple. They do better this way, planted as sticks. Which one will dig deeply into the earth to send a taproot that anchors here? Which one in the picture, slender stick, will perish, being planted too late? And I'm going to actually stop there because the next two are sort of a little pair that kind of go together. So back to you, Jendi. Over to you, I should say.
Thank you so much. Riffing off of that, I'm actually going to read a poem other than what's in the book, and then I'll go into poems in the book because we're in a political mood today. And this is a poem that I wrote after this book came out, that just came out today on the Queer Love Project Substack. And it's something that a cisgender friend asked me as the title. And she's trying to be an ally, but she also struggles with expressing her own feelings in a patriarchal world. So this poem is inspired lovingly by her question. Why do you wear so many gay shirts? Are you angry? Because I have no team, don't care to advertise where I've been. Because the men's colors in Walmart are gray, black, beer, and America. No, I did find one Ken Dream Date tee, but that was in 2023, when we thought Barbie could beat the destroyer of worlds. Because there used to be breasts under Lance tongue-kissing Drew on this faded cartoon cotton reading Kyle's B&B where love is love. And I hoped those three-dimensional boys would shake too quick pronoun assumptions. Because I'm no angrier than a wine mom, a biker who swears by John 3:16 over a bleeding heart on his leathers, a wet baby squalling in a daddy's girl onesie. Because I can't resist an octopus. Because I had to pee in the supermarket men's room, and I'm waiting for the one stall when the urinal is clearly open, anxiously praying testosterone means never having to explain yourself. Because another short guy with earrings presses into the small space behind me and just stands there. Because he clocks my lightning bolt in pink, white, blue at the same time as I clock his wide hips, and we smile together. So that's on the Queer Love Project today. Now I'm going to read some poems for Introvert Pervert. Satisfaction. My therapist wakes up every morning wanting to die. And I say, that's the only desire we can count on coming true. But what we both wish for is not to die, but to wake up someone who doesn't remember pleasure feels like death. Death feels like washing dishes in the wreckage of unwanted pieces that could still be eaten. We're too separate from the gnawed scalloped edge of cheese, the spit limp lettuce in the smear of oil my therapist would never lick from my plate. What's stopping me is nothing. That's the porridge of happiness, the saltless okay. Incest is our brand. My therapist has a one-woman show. I write novels about piss from Saddleroad Press and bleach my house. When the unspeakable sits on your sofa crying pinkly for 50 minutes, and you win prizes for dancing with it, only the ridiculous remains beyond your mouth to be sucked like a red number 5 migraine 1,000-calorie lollipop by you, I mean me. My therapist is wearing a low-cut sundress flushing with sweat. I try to look anywhere, but I've only been a man for 2 years. My world is a cornucopia of new mistakes. She asks me to work early on banal disappointments, and I tell her I want to throw my cat out the door. I signed up for this warm body and it doesn't please me. So yeah, when you're an emotional incest survivor, you get engulfment trauma from your cat. It's really fun. This poem is called Brief. And it's about my brief and semi not illustrious career as a lawyer for like 6 months. November reverts to sugar maple, to spring's lemon green, that wind will soon spend like lawyers' hours, shuffling yellow papers into winter. Sun flags morning's message in primary blues. I live in this body. Stop the east-west line running and rattling its world wheels into the coming day's combat, and remember, a man sang in the subway 30 years ago when I thought him old and beautifully loved soft like a circulated penny. I worked for insurance litigators in hallways gray as icebergs, where we heard bats returning at dawn to the eaves during our document production. They knew what time was for sleep, but we did not. Each day I threw up breakfast. I dressed slim and yellow as a sapling. The man had a hat full of change and 2 gospel measures he sang over and over as if new, like a bird for whom spring is everything. The 6 train daily exhaled us as clouds of soot and ambition mistaken for being alive. The maple tree has no insurance. This won't be its last green. I want to live more like an animal. I thought I was poor because I came home to violence every night, and every morning my quarters chimed into the hat with other small gifts. This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Thank you. So there's a whole section of poems in this book about the Sopranos. And I am kind of obsessed with The Sopranos. I watched the first 4 seasons on bootleg VHS tapes when it came out because I couldn't afford HBO then. And then I gave up because it was too violent. And then I started it all over again from the beginning in 2022 and binged the whole thing in an attempt to understand what a man was like in my early transition. And more importantly, how a man should dress. So that much I did learn from The Sopranos, but it's a just fascinating show to me because of what it says about masculinity and the family as a cult of violence. And we can talk more about that during the discussion part. But this is my Tony poem, my first Tony poem. I came in at the end for Tony Soprano. I denied myself nothing and 3 times nothing. Smoke zeros from my mouth. A sigh in the orchard, waiting for dusk to dig up teeth. Because the buried retire, the teasing pastures are sold, and haunting is a lie. Otherwise, the markets would go native with ghosts, those scalped heads we call canned peaches, a river of jawbones that container ships plow down uninspected. The ones I've sent before me don't stop running their mouths underground. I'll bring them where no one listens. To you, ears sealed like a new washing machine. You with gold in your eyes and your thoughts flapping like a poker shuffle. Drop dead, gorgeous. Every raging dream I excavate in our gentle talks, I replant with my fists in a woman's hair. The bed's mechanical gasp sounding like the cage filter in the zoo, where the indifferent snake blinked at the smudge we fucked onto the glass. I took an oath to you instead of a hammer. Here, buy yourself a nice country. This shore, this stable, this must be the place we could finally be a family. It's a cash business. Do the math. I denied myself nothing, and 3 times nothing is the same. And the last one I'm going to read right now is called Subtext, because I'm always looking for queer subtext and things that perhaps never had it. This one is inspired by a conversation with the writer Jessica Pegas, who's the author of, oh God, what is it called? Anyway, she wrote a book that was very good about God and queerness, and I cannot remember it now, but Jessica Pegas, look her up. Subtext. How English pirates wear their hair. The first St. Teresa, but not the second. A best friend at a boys' boarding school who died young. Looking at her across wave-pounded rocks, then when she turns toward you, looking away. A torso shot full of arrows, obviously. Don't marry. Let's pretend to be girls forever. Murdering him, becoming him. Greece, for people who are not from Greece, and to a lesser extent, Italy. Any villain monologue that rhymes. Burning. Flaunting your eyes, your breasts, your tongue, after and because they've been pulled from your body. Ice skating, except for women. A man who dresses like a shadow with a loud nemesis. That little twist in the hips on the crucifix. The God Painter, that's the name of her book. Jessica Pegas, The God Painter. Shout out. Thank you very much. Back to you, Subhaga.
I just love Jendi's book so much. First of all, I mean, hasn't it got like the best title and certainly a very juicy cover. I've read it, I don't know, 3 or 4 times in preparation for today. So I feel like every time you read a poem, I'm sort of reading it along with you in my mind. Hi, Lee. We decided to split up our time. So you got here just in time to hear me read my second set. Yeah, the yearning for a kind of masculinity that you were talking about, Jendi, and watching The Sopranos and finding in other places. These next 2 poems look at that a bit. Soft spot for Chris. Resting on its nest of thighs, its nest of eggs, his soft dick, the only way I ever saw it, my long dead friend, his Cupid's body, his concupiscence at odds with his innocence, nude at home, the fluid silk of kimono, the limp wrist, player's smoke, his languid eyes and droll mouth, his lazy words. Nights, he and his friend Donald would go out looking for Richard, they would say, calling on Spruce Street, Richard, Richard, only to find him as ever at the bathhouse, where they competed for a pink plastic pig trophy, whoever had the most men that night. That last year when we shared a townhouse, the crazy trick come boyfriend who said he was a warlock and whose teeth could be removed, leaving a frightful hole in his face, called the fire trucks on us, a parting threat, not the fire, but the sirens, after he had beaten my friend with a vacuum cleaner hose, of all things. Later, we traded massages, him naked on my back, on my buttocks, the soft of him like a purse, spent of coin. His penis relaxed, almost feminine, delicate, stripped of its hot blood, its one eye closed for now to what might be gotten. In the 80s, I lived in a row house in Philadelphia with 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 gay men. They were always this rotating cast, and I was so jealous of everything about their sexual lives. They're, of course, all long since gone. Husbandry. I used to think I wanted a husband, a soft cushion against the world's sharp corners, like that least husband material jazz pianist, my friend's brother, who once lifted the sheets for me to back into his belly. A husband like a brother, like my friend Paul, who used to drag me down Christopher Street, me in one hand, bagged tall boy in the other. Thomas, whose bed I shared for mostly chaste naps before the baths for him and a book for me. Now I am husband to myself, that deep drop into the root of me, the daily chores, dog watcher in the still dim morning when hungry things might lurk, fire maker, wood mover, tea boiler. I'm self-anointed in baggy sweats and men's vest. Never mind my breasts, soft vent, that place that opens to where I'm cleft. Yeah, these bodies and how they're formed, and sometimes their lack of satisfaction. These last four poems are from the final section of the book, which really sort of is the one that looks at my coming to terms with a recovered memory of early childhood sexual abuse. Penumbra. Moon dial, stake thrust into my vampire's heart, innocent predator, despoiled child with a hunger I could not name or satisfy. This is the behavior of children who've been sexually abused. Images escape from the rim of sunspot, memory burrowed in the darker core. What if I am the light, decades long, elliptic, spun within like Saturn's rings, lingering winters broken by brief glimpses of what the sun has shown me? Thank you. I have a friend who's a therapist and who does guided journeys with various kinds of medicine, and did a 4-day long sort of psilocybin process with her, and it was extremely useful. And this poem looks at that. Psilocybin recovered memory. I am the yarn of my own remaking. Shades of purple bled out to what's stored and well buried under years. Where my body is bone of hip and pubis, muscle and tissue, only space between my navel and my thighs, the trouble spot erased, an open keyhole of faces, a series of shuttlecocks to sweep colors back and forth until, as Rembrandt said of his nudes, I want to pinch, and I do not pinch, but swept my hands between my hips and thighs to find my lap affirmed and firm with flesh. Like a key in a forgotten lock, it turned me toward a glint of light, ruffle of dress, and the lap of the man who raised my father, and then heat and suffocation beneath the comfort of weighted blanket, flailing arms. The watcher asks, "How are you doing?" I say, "Something happened." On his lap, where I am told I loved to climb, couldn't get enough. He touched me, or something in me touched in him what he couldn't or didn't resist. I can't be more clear. I was only 3, or if not 3, then 2, walking. No words for what happened, only fear flowering in my flesh. No longer only seed. Thank you. And then just 2 more. Part of the integration process of the psilocybin journey, my friend is just an amazing therapist. She has a series of these singing bowls, and she has one that's big enough that you can stand in. This poem is about that. Singing bowls. I stood in the deep bronze bowl, put my feet on the feet engraved there, while the guide rang its vibrato into the core of me, root, sex, power, plexus, heart, throat, and out the top of my head. Just now, a late wasp, November 1st, hums from a closed window to closed window. With a broom, I coax it out the door, brown body flickering in afternoon light. Sitting in this cabin, its stilt legs under the back deck, hand-sized leaves rain down into the failing wood. The trees create a woody bowl. Somewhere across the way, someone hammers throughout the day. At night, 2 owl voices build in the dark. I wrote the poems in the final section of the manuscript, most of them anyway, on a residency at the Sundress Academy for the Arts, just outside of Knoxville, Tennessee. And I opted for what they call, charmingly called the Writers Co-op, which is a refurbished chicken coop out in the woods. It's quite wonderful. I recommend it. There's no plumbing or electricity, but there's a wood stove and an outhouse, and it was quite great. And then this is the book's epilogue. Eileen Cleary, who's my editor and publisher, likes her books often have a proem, which is like a prologue poem, but I wrote an ending poem instead. The book speaks. I cannot put my memories in order. The moon just wrecks them every time. Morosa Di Giorgio, The History of Violets, 18. A fabulous book. If you haven't read Your Dazzling Death by Cass Donish. You need to read it. And I loved it so much. She has a whole section of palimpsest poems using Marosa di Giorgio's book. I spent $77 to get it. It's out of print. It's only a chapbook, but I really had to have it. And then I read through Cass's book and compared the palimpsests to the original. It's so good. Anyway, sorry, little footnote there. The book speaks. I am a jaw pried open, old barber's pole red and white striped, rough tools, a little blood and pain. Then release. Who needs Novocaine? A hit of bourbon, quiet room, trees with their promise of relief, hung. Jung said tooth loss means transition, beyond transitory, evolving. I'm the place you come to unlock what time and your mind buried so deeply you had to travel the mycelium highway to reach it. Here I find you, innocent, vessel of shame and rage. I open you, unbutton your jeans. You are warrior. Let loose your hair. Take up the space you crave. Now do you see? You can love what you are without flinching. Thank you.
God, I just love that last line so incredibly much. It seems like that's the journey that I think everyone is on or should be on, but perhaps especially when we have trauma consciousness to be aware of what we've been through, to process shame and move past it. It's just something that's always coming up as a writer at another level, the deeper we go, I think. So my last set is going to be these 3 poems. Then we'll have a little discussion. So this poem, the title is in Polish. I don't really speak Polish. I got this from Google Translate, and it is pronounced nie dziękuję, which means no thank you in Polish. I'm going to Poland to piss on my ancestors' graves. Where is the bathroom? 1 cup of tea, please. Would you like to suck my dick? The Duolingo owl is hard to shock. Baba Yaga, the forest witch of Eastern Europe, eats children, and frankly, I see her point. My son's grandmother is taking him to Australia because it's something he wanted 3 years ago. She says he never gives her trouble. In Poland, they eat pickle soup, which is not a euphemism for anything. The sun shines 1 day out of the year. Giant birds with feathers like dirty gray hair carry off the disobedient. Please bend over. Let's do this again sometime. In case I wish to disclose that I am married, how many children I have, and where I went to university, the Duolingo owl is eager to help with that too. Baba Yaga's yard is fenced by the bones and skulls of Harvard Business School graduates. Such soft babies, like koalas on Instagram. I have no FOMO for the beach, the sunset over Humpy Bong or Woolloomooloo, or the long-named city that translates to where the devil urinates. Although I have smiled through some family trips to the synagogue or the trampoline park by recalling a gay writer's decision to risk astonishment when a man unexpectedly pissed in his mouth. I suppose he did not know how to say no thank you in Polish. Nie dziękuję, offers the Duolingo owl, who rarely finds himself in unsafe sexual situations. And another sex poem. This is very like that last poem. This poem is rather loosely and irreverently inspired by things that we read in Garth Greenwell's online class, Saying Yes to Life. One of those references by his extremely erudite classmates was Avi Sakatopoulou's Sexuality Beyond Consent. So, of course, I had to write Reading Sexuality Beyond Consent with my cat. The polymorphously perverse nips at my heels. No, Theodore. In the fishbowl of the office, the analyst dabbles a claw in slippery waters. Dr. Sakatopoulou, affirmative consent assumes a rational subject who doesn't tear open bags of raw chicken, who knows what'll make him sick of his childhood. Theodore. Rrr. Heart object, infantile desire attaches to feet like the old ball and chain they taught us was love and kittens. It's all over the skin like fur. Attachment's barbed tongue supposed to clean us of saying yes to no. Theodore, down is not a safe word, but a shot we both didn't see coming. The future's needle that'll make you perfectly compliant in my arms. More and more and more, says Dr. Sakatopoulou. Who wants to eat my eyeballs when I die? Who's a good boy? As I read this, Theodore and his frenemies, the orange cats, are growling at each other on the couch. So I guess they approve. And the last one I'm going to read is called Portrait of a Marriage, which is named after Vita Sackville West's son's memoir about his parents' poly relationship. And this, of course, is dedicated to Adam. Portrait of a Marriage. We lost the negatives in the basement. I wanted it all, the holy canopy, being a public virgin, white silk flowers and eyes bloody from forced in contacts. How much could it really hurt our mothers? On a scale of tattoo to mastectomy, nothing compares to you and me fighting for our sacred bed. You wanted it all to make sense or be honest about the madness. We never made up the wedding album. Now I'm no longer a girl. I wish I'd saved my hair. Like the cake topper we froze for a year and couldn't eat. We were used to calculating many pleasures not worthwhile. To be properly married, one must register for a waffle iron. We rubbed their faces in it, those old conventions, though no one would give me away. All the dead smiling in these photographs, some sincerely happy now to have left their plus ones. We dug up the pictures to prove we weren't alone, so a girl would give us her accidental baby. That year I was in free fall between the generations. Maybe I won't forgive you for telling the social worker I cut myself. Flash forward to happiness, or an ordinary kind of trouble. On a scale of incest flashbacks to midnight feedings, waking up scarred into manhood was easy for me, and I don't care about anyone. Probably you'll forgive me for becoming unbridled. Picture how we needn't stay the same to stay. Thank you very much.
Poem kills me every time.
Thank you. So I guess now we can have a little chat about our respective books.
Mhm.
I got some ideas, but Subhaga, if you want to say something first, go ahead. Ask me anything.
Well, you have just kind of the most amazing epilogue poem in your book. I'm wondering, how did it fall into the assemblage of the book? Was it written toward the end? Did you write it to complete the book, or what's its genesis?
Gosh, I'm trying to remember. I wrote most of the poems in this collection in a relatively short period over like 4 months of the winter of 2023. And the final poem in the book, for those who haven't read it, is called The Author. And it's kind of making fun of a traditional list of accomplishments. And so I wrote somewhere in that period, and I sort of had it in mind as like a fake bio at the end of the book, because honestly, being a writer is such a ridiculous and thankless job sometimes that um, I just thought it'd be funny to look at what did I actually get out of doing all these things, and sometimes it isn't the prize, it's the silly things that you remember that are the most enjoyable or the most life changing. So yeah, do you want me to read it, or, or do we have time to
I
read
was
it, or just
actually
you have to
thinking, I
buy the
was actually
book?
thinking of the one that you just read. I sort of think of
Yes.
that as your sort of epilogue poem, the marriage poem. So
Yes.
that's the one I was more curious about
I
in
guess
terms
that's an epilogue after the epilogue. Yes, that's kind of, yeah, the Portrait of a Marriage is kind of the serious capstone to the journey of family and transition in this book. And then the author is the sort of humorous fake bio at the end. Um, and yeah, Portrait of a Marriage was not written at the end of the writing process, but when I was arranging the poems, I wanted it to end on an affirming note because this was mostly written like right after my top surgery. That had been in March of that year, and my husband and I just kind of figuring out where that left us in terms of our relationship. Like we weren't going to leave each other or anything, but it was a big adjustment, and my wanting to be in the world more sexually as a man and relationally as a man. The same envy that you have of your gay friends in those poems, uh, and him having a sort of a different orientation towards me and relationships was something we were very much in the throes of working out. But I wanted the book to end on the strengths of our relationship because I knew we were going to make it through, even if the book chronicles a bit more of a tumultuous patch.
Mm, that's beautifully, beautifully said. I mean, I think it is
Yes.
important for books that tackle difficult material, to find that point. When I read from transitory, when I've read from transitory, I always end on the litany, which is not quite the last poem, but I have room for you and me.
Mhm.
And I felt the same way with this one, in trying to find a place to end it, to sort of write from a place of great affirmation. I mean, I think your book and that final poem are what anti-trans people really need to read to understand, that
Mhm.
we're all just humans trying to navigate life in the bodies that we were born into. And the idea that you transitioned, you know, in the later part of a fairly long marriage, which has continued, is to
Mhm.
me just the most amazing testament to love between your husband and you. It's just, it's really a beautiful
Yes.
thing.
Thank you, and thank you for saying it that way. We're very blessed, and you know, it, people tend to take sides. Like cis people are like, wow, he must really be such a great guy to stay with you. Or trans people will be like, wow, you've been so great about like doing things at this slow pace to keep him on board. And I really don't feel like that either framing is helpful. I think the way you put it is much more helpful. And, speaking of book structure and how you hold difficult material, I had the same reaction to the whole last section that you were reading from in your book, that there is so much beauty and gentleness and kind of peacefulness that is holding the recovered memories in that section,
Mm,
that it feels like a really transcendent experience despite how painful the knowledge is. Like it's very healing.
mm,
And I even felt like the way that you led into it throughout the whole book, you give a little hint in the beginning that you're going to have these memories in the first section where you're talking about your family,
mhm,
so that it's not a shock to the reader. And then you circle back to it after you've put a lot of other positive, sensual, kind of expansive material in place to cushion that. And
mm.
that felt like a very good structure to make it approachable to the reader. And I was wondering, like, was that how you planned it, and what order did you write that in? And like, did you go back and seed those things in the beginning poems, or were they already there from when you first drafted them?
Oh, that's just a wonderful question. I started writing this book while Transitory was in the works. Jen Martelli, my beautiful, beloved friend who has left us, when she read Transitory in one of its earliest iteration, I guess it was basically like a chronicle of each of the murders of trans or gender nonconforming people in 2020. And I think there was only at that point one poem in which I talked about myself. And so Jen said, "Where are you in this book?" Which
Mm-hmm.
opened up just a huge, not just the writing of the book, but a huge dive into my identity. Why
Mm-hmm.
why was I writing a book about trans people? Why was I so invested? And I was 71 a couple of weeks ago, so I'm a person who's been around the block a few times. And just everything that's changed since 2020, the conversations around gender, around sexuality, around the fact that they're not the same thing. Your gender and your sexuality are not, aligned, don't have to be aligned. And So I went through a whole journey of unpacking my non-binariness, which I actually got from this group of sixth graders that I, did a writing workshop with in the local schools. There's a poem in there for them, all of whom I had known as kindergartners when I was the director of a local community school. And here they all were, these non-binary, really androgynous people just embrace. And I thought, wow, if I had had that choice when I was, what are you, 12 in sixth grade, right? So I started writing the poems, and all my life I wondered, I had a lot of shame about the kind of the sexual events of my childhood. I lived in a very sexually active neighborhood among the children. I just thought that was just the way it was. And so it took me a long time, and finally, those words are from my partner in the poem Penumbra. These are the behaviors of children who've been sexually abused. And so I thought, well, maybe I should really figure this out. So just before I went off to SAFTA to try to complete the book, I went and had this, psilocybin journey, and had the memory come on. So I had built a kind of a cushion of 60 some odd years for myself, to let that come forward. And it was also important to me to just write about discovering your own sexual and gendered expression. I think of myself as kind of post-sexual at this point in life. But I have had, my own share of sexual experiences, and with men, with women, and my own curiosities around gender and gender expression. And I wrote this poem after reading Saeed Jones's Prelude to a Bruise, which is kind of a fantasy about gay sex. And my partner, it was very hot summertime. My partner came home, and I was like, I think I'm actually transmasculine. She was like, oh, that's interesting. That's cool. So we just sort of unpacked that. It wasn't a surprise really, because we've been together, like I like to say, off and on for like 35 years, mostly on for like the last 15, but we have a long history of knowing each other. So yeah, the book is really interwoven, but I love the way you framed it, Jendi. Is just really, I think that's like the best encapsulation of what the book is doing that I've heard. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a very positive book where the recovery of the memory, instead of shattering things, puts them together. And I think what a lot of us with trauma are afraid of sometimes is like, can I handle that trip into my own mind? And I certainly went through some of that writing one of the books that Saddle Road has published, which is my most recent novel, Origin Story, which is about recovered memories, which I don't actually have. I don't have recovered memories. I have more like C.S. Eliot would say, had the experience but missed the meaning. Like I knew what happened to me all my life, as far as I know, but I didn't put it together of, oh, that was really messed up in this particular way until, relatively later on. Um, so yeah, so it feels very encouraging to read a book like yours in which the memory journey is actually restorative rather than destructive, and something that's not frightening to people if they're thinking about going into those depths.
What you said from Elliot, let me just say too,
yeah.
That's so important because, after the fact, I have done some research and reading about behaviors and feelings and confusions and so forth of survivors of early childhood sexual abuse. And it made so much of my earlier life make sense, mistaking sex for love, inappropriate boundaries and all this kind of stuff. So sort of all that's tied up, I think, too, and the way the book sort of tries to cast things with their innocence in a way.
I've been reading a Substack of a really interesting feminist thinker called Clementine Morrigan, who writes about incest, both covert and physical. And something that she's been writing about a lot is that it's not so much the issue of like, did this particular physical thing happen or did that particular physical thing happen, but a kind of a belief system and a boundarylessness and a parentification and a sexualization atmosphere within the family. And so I don't think we always need to share the details of what happened in a mechanical sense in order to write about the ramifications, because those are things, that's what we're really working on. I think a lot of the time is the false beliefs and the boundary issues and the intimacy issues and all of that stuff your experience is different from my experience, but the things that we have in common are those those patterns that we keep
Yeah.
having to work at higher and higher levels as we grow.
Yeah, my therapist that I worked with at the time said, even putting aside the early childhood sexual abuse, just the sexual miasma in my family,
Mm,
my mother's really weird attitudes about sexuality was its own form of trauma.
yeah, yeah, you got to read Clementine Morgan. She's all
I'm
about
going
that.
to, I've written down her name. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Yeah, about the mother poems, I found a lot of that really relatable, the not just the ones you read, but there were ones in the beginning of the book that, like, when we talked about, when we were preparing for this conversation, we had so much to talk about, like mother's policing of gender and mother's own anxieties. I could really see that in some of the backstory that I got from the first part of your book about the mother's incredible and kind of intrusive investment in the so-called daughter's gender performance and sexual behavior or lack thereof, which is its own form of kind of incestuous miasma, as you put it. Um, and it seemed to me, from the way you described her German background, and then your dad being like part Italian, more working class, or more economically, I guess, low, not as wealthy as her family. Um, the way that femininity and class and race consciousness, like proximity to whiteness, proximity to middle classness, so often gets expressed, I think, in mothers policing their daughter's gender or their assumed daughter's gender.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and as someone who had the same experience, I found that in your book to be a really good um, intersectional kind of thing to point out, and you don't really say anything about it of theoretically, you just make it so obvious through the details you chose to share.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I wonder about what happened to my mother as a child. Her father was an alcoholic. He was a womanizer.
Mm-hmm.
She was the baby in the family. She was the precious one. I mean, I've tried to tell those stories through the book because, you know, these are patterns that come up in families and they're not uncommon at all. And so it's always
Mm-hmm.
important to be able to, I think, step back and see there's a kind of naivete in a way because it's so enculturated that people just behave this way. I mean, I did the same thing in transitory. It's like we have to remember that even these men who committed these crimes are also, in a way, victims of the system. They're victims of the homophobic, transphobic, hyper-masculine, toxic
Mm-hmm.
masculinity culture that we live
Most
in.
definitely.
Not put too fine
Definitely.
a point on it.
I mean, you say a brief history of my sex life. It's kind of cute and ironic. It's funny. It's like self-deprecating because how is the history of our sex life not really the history of the country, the history
Yeah,
of our past, our generations, our society? Like, there's nothing that's just a history of your own sex life. It's always racism, sexism, abuse, intergenerational trauma, religion, and hopefully some healing patterns as well.
yeah. I'm going to ask you a question too. I really loved the form of the McGuffey erasures, the way you sort of mimicked, a primer. So tell me a little bit about those poems and the source and so forth.
I
Love it.
love erasure poetry for the same reasons I love collage and finding queer subtext in places that it was maybe never intended. It's it's just fun to remix things, and it's fun to work against a text. Um, it's a little rebellious side. And I took a erasure poetry online class with John Sibley Williams, who does a lot of good, relatively affordable online poetry classes. He's really nice. And for a little while, I was kind of excited about doing erasure poetry and tried to gather a bunch of didactic texts that were telling you about what it is to be a boy, what it is to be a girl, and to be good and obedient. Because a lot of those primers from the olden days were really focused on obedience and really focused on like molding you into a good little child, and then to just screw around with those. It was a lot of fun. I want to do more erasure poetry and pair it with collage, but um, yeah, these were kind of one offs at that point, and I got distracted as I often do and did something else.
Well, they're also, I love they're sort of wonderfully transgressive. I'm trying to find the one. about the cowboy. It's culture fag training.
Oh,
Would,
yes, that was something I got. That was a
would
pamphlet I got
either
at the tag sale.
would either of you read it, please? That would be fun.
Culture fag training. Should
I
I
want
read
to
culture
read.
fag
Yeah.
training? Okay. This is there's a paper and used books and ephemera sale that comes to town a couple of times a year. And so now my office craft room is filled with weird little pamphlets and decaying pieces of paper that I plan to use for collage if I live 200 years old. And this one was an erasure of the U.S. Department of Agriculture Farmers Bulletin on Breaking and Training Colts from 1923. So I'll go through these pamphlets and I'll look for something that has words that, taken out of context, could be salacious or amusing, and then I'll buy them for $5 and write an erasure. So culture fag training. The value and usefulness of hose depend on whether or not they are well broken. By broken is meant safe to handle, memory, and punishment. Few hoes are inherently vicious. However, a sensitive hoe must be treated sharply. Obedient, a uniform thinks that there is no limit to his power. In reality, the whip is of equal importance with kindness. Handle and tease. It will not be difficult to break him. Eyeing up, for the first time, on the hind parts and on the legs. Gentle, that is, pet and rub the head. One must be fearless without taking unnecessary chances. That's what it's like. Command come, reward with suckling noises. Many hoes prefer the whip in breaking fear. It will soon be possible to caress broken objects. A hoe should be loose, together with the sensation of wearing collar. Use a broken gentle hoe for a mate. It is particularly important that you have absolute control. He does not frighten because of extra long shafts. Always use knee pads. The hoe may be tired for a time and accustomed to being mounted until the hoe shows no sign of self will. Use the guy severely, and after he becomes submissive to drag between his legs and all around him, importance of a good mouth. Work, tushes, walk, walk, walk.
It's so good. Do you know Matt Donovan's collaboration he did with his wife? What's it called? The Missing Department. They took these
Mhm.
old uh, pulp newspapers
Oh, cool.
where people ran these ads for missing people, and
Oh
then
my gosh.
he did like erasure poems, and she did collages. She's an artist. I
Oh my
forgot her
gosh.
name.
I've got to get that and copy it shamelessly. The missing department.
The Missing Department, yeah.
Okay, gotta get
It's
that.
really quite beautiful. Yeah, that's great. I mean, I really love, erasure is so fun to work with. And there are so many ways to do it, blackout or leaving white space. But I'm really wanting now to do something like what you've done of leaving the lines in as if it's like almost like a fill in the blank.
Yes, the Mad Libs
Brilliant.
of poetry. Yeah, we went through a few different styles with my book designer, the publisher at WordWorks, because this is pretty much how I did it when I sent the manuscript in MS Word, mostly because I have no formatting skills whatsoever. So I just use underscore. Um, and we talked about, do we want to do it like that? Do we want to do it grayed out? I thought blackout would be too severe.
Yeah.
And so we tried a whole bunch of different things and ended up settling on that. Then this, which one is this? There's a cat. This
It's
is
an
Rilke.
orange
Is this
cat.
Rilke? Yeah, it's Rilke. That's Rilke.
I had a whole bunch of blackout erasures in the earlier draft of this book, and it felt a little too heavy after a while. I
Mm-hmm.
pulled a bunch of those poems. Most of them came from the psilocybin. Um, Actually, there was a poem. It was in Brink. It's quite long because it was the therapist's notes, which she typed up
Right.
and gave to me, and then I did an erasure, blackout erasure from them. And one of the publishers who read an early version of the book said that the book was like weirdly claustrophobic, and
Mm,
the way it was recounting what my experience was. So it was appropriate, but not for publication,
right.
sadly. So. But I think it was
Maybe
good to
maybe a
winnow
different
that
book.
down. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I see you have. I was looking through your book to find where you did the burning high blend, because we all bow down to Torrin Greathouse
We do.
for her invention of the burning high blend, which is an erasure poetry form, which was one of the poems that Joseph Lee Williams shared in the class that I took, and I was just blown away. So I loved that you did that, and the way that you did it, you just used gaps, which does feel more spacious on the page when you did the erasure instead of blackout.
Yeah, thank you. I that's my preference at this point. It's tricky when you're
Yeah.
sending poems out because you have to like you have to actually turn the font white and then
Mm-hmm.
go white out over it in order. Otherwise, I had a poem that was going to go into print and it was this erasure from transitory. And what I got was the text. It was from like an FBI bulletin or something. So I was like, something's really wrong with this. It's the
Yeah.
original text. So we had to go back and
Mhm.
fix that. But I do love
Yes.
Burning High Bun. I always teach it to students that I'm working with because
Mhm.
I think, a lot of us started writing poems or were shown how to write poems by just write something out in prose, right? And then go through and get rid of what doesn't serve. So the burning hybrid can really help people to see what needs to be winnowed away from a poem.
Mhm.
And then, if you can reduce it then to a haiku, in grad school we used to say, this is my haiku that used to be a novel. It's like
It's like this meeting could have been an email.
right, exactly.
This novel could have been a haiku.
Yeah,
Did
Torrance
did
really,
you
really.
start did you start with the prose paragraph and then work down to the middle version and then to the haiku, or did you start with the smaller one and then surround it with words so it would come out right?
I started with I started with this passage from Turin's book, "Wound in the Shape of a Wound," which is just an absolutely brilliant, brilliant book. So I started with her epigraph, and then I wrote the prose piece, sort of derived from the epigraph, and then
Mm-hmm.
did the erasure, and then finally um, the haiku. So I did use the process in a way of burning it away.
Mm-hmm.
And she, I know Torin pretty much always uses blackout. I think it's more. I'm taking this wonderful seminar through the academy with Dawn Lundy Martin, whom, if you don't know, is just a brilliant, brilliant poet and great scholar. And it's on, queering and deranging and transgressing the line in
Mm-hmm.
poetry.
That
And
sounds
it's
great.
been really, really insightful. And so for me, I think when Turin uses that blackout, in the poems, I think there's something especially transgressive about that. It conveys a
Mhm.
sense of anger, conveys a sense of
Yes.
blackening out, darkening out, removing what, you want to take away.
Hmm.
But I found it was just a little too much for me, a little too heavy.
Yeah, I don't think it would have made sense in the style of your book because there is a lot of softness in your book. Just there are a lot of lightness and softness.
Yeah, thank
Um,
you.
it just has texture. The texture of it is gentler.
Yeah, thank you. Should I read that poem, The Burning High Bun?
Yes,
Do we have
yes,
time?
do. Hmm?
Wound in the shape of a wound, one burning high bun after Torrin A. Greathouse. My mother disowns me, and suddenly I am a folktale. Am I the serpent headed girl, or her endless reflection, or the winged mare burst forth from her blood, child of slaughter, wound from the mouth of a wound? She used to brag, if you betray me, using the indefinite you, I flush you down the toilet. What does it mean to disown? Somehow, though I disappointed her regularly, my hair, my legs, my weight, my clothes, my lovers, somehow, right up to the end, when I sat bedside with my sister, waiting for her final breath, she did not flush me. Why? My brother, her greatest love after my father, not his father, she disowned. He did behave badly, did later hold her accountable for keeping his parentage a secret, threatening messages, letters, sending their wedding photo, a man with his face and slicked back hair. In the will, no provision made. Me, the executrix, executioner with the letter informing him. What wound devoured her trust? What beast betrayed her to threaten her child with this? My mother, a folktale girl, the mouth of a wound, betray, disappoint, love. She did not. My brother, she disowned, did keep his parentage a secret, a man with his face and slicked back hair, no provision made. Me, the executioner, to threaten her child with this. My mother, a wound, betray, disappoint. She did disown, threatened child. So by the time I got to the haiku, I tried to show, my mother's own damage in a way. I mean, she used to say things. I mean, my mother was really, loyalty was like her prime trait that she prized in people. And she would say literally, if you betray me, I flush you down the toilet. I mean, we had this, she excised so much family, her sister's children. So we had this tiny little nucleus so you were always on alert. Like this was what could happen to you. You could be disowned, you could be cut off. And I was really terrified after I had my memory, to tell my sister. My mother's been dead since 2016, and my sister and I have gotten a lot closer because I was afraid, that she would cut me out of the family. And amazingly, in the past 5 years, since my mother died, 10 years almost, or it is 10 years, I guess, my sister and I have gotten so much closer. My sexuality, my books, they've read my books, my grown nephews and my niece to whom I dedicated this book. It's all in the open now. Everything that was a secret all those years,
That's so healing.
It's quite amazing.
I'm picturing suddenly this kind of room in the afterlife where all of our mothers who had so many things in common are like having some kind of conversation, and hopefully that's a healing conversation because, I'm probably complaining about all of us that we're writing about them and that they don't like what we're wearing and our legs are too hairy. But then hopefully they get into the good stuff about why they behave this way and make some friends. Because we had such a similar experience with that you just described as my mother as well.
That's a great book of poems right there.
So, yeah, it's so, what is that about? That loyalty, that cutting off, like the people who, our mothers must have had so many attachment issues from whatever went down in their childhood that manifests that going towards the very thing that they were so afraid of, cutting people off when they desperately need connection.
Well, I have that one poem that quotes my grandmother saying to my mother and my mother saying to me, if you do more than hold hands with a boy, you'll get pregnant and then we'll have to go down to the lake and drown ourselves or your papa will kill us. It said
logic
in a joking sort of a way, but it was like, that was the message, do more than hold hands with a boy, we'll have to die.
Yeah. Stakes are high.
Yeah, the Afterlife Support Group of Mothers. There's a collaborative book we should work on.
Right. All of my friends who are all survivors of narcissistic mothers, all have to contribute a poem. There's a new Saddle Road Press project on, Ruth.
Oh my God, the narcissism. Yeah.
Adult children of narcissists write poems about the voice of their parents. Then we're all going to need that psilocybin therapy. You're going to tell your therapist a bus load is going to show up at her door.
It's a beautiful place out in Olympia, Washington. You would be most welcome. She has really a great space for that.
Definitely going to talk to you about that offline.
We need to be able to laugh about it. I mean, we have survived to this point. There's a beautiful book. I think we talked about this, To Survive on This Distant Shore of Trans Elders. That was one of the books I was looking at when I was working on Transitory. And, to survive, all of us have survived anybody to have survived their childhood, right? I read an article one time that was like, no matter how good a parent you are, your kid is still going to need therapy, right? It just comes with the package. But when you add queerness, when you add neurodivergence or disability or transness, you add all those things in, it's a lot to make it to adulthood. I mean, this is why we have the Trevor's Project, and this is why we have all these support groups, to help young people, and why trans affirming care is so essential.
Absolutely.
Young,
yeah.
That's true.
Yes.
Everybody donate to Trans Health Northampton or your local other trans charity.
I wonder if anybody else has any questions, Stephen or Lee.
Oh yeah, that's right. We've been
I
talking for
don't
so
see
long.
any in chat.
Yeah, unmute yourselves if you have things to share.
It's a small enough group.
Yeah.
It has been really a wonderful conversation. I mean, I would love it if you could go on talking and reading and more people could join in and, it could just go on for a much longer time. Thank you both. I love both of your poetry and I was familiar with Jendi's, but I didn't know yours. And I'm so glad to have been introduced to it.
Thank you so much.
So I think, however, we're probably done pretty much.